A brutal murder rocks a small town.
It's a community that would not expect a homicide.
A wife and mother gunned down in cold blood.
It's not often you find a woman who's been shot 9 times.
The clues point to her cheating husband.
What has he done?
He admitted to being with his mistress that night.
But police push deeper.
It had all the makings for a good suburban crime drama.
Tiny fibers and forensics reveal the shocking truth. This dramatic reconstruction is based on eyewitness accounts, police evidence, and court records. On January 15th, 1989, police in Greenburgh, New York, receive a frantic emergency call.
My name is Paul Solomon. I just got home.
I think my wife is dead. She's lying on the floor bleeding. Mr. Rahman! Mr. Rahman! I need your help! I think she's dead. Help!
A quiet townhouse is soon a busy crime scene. Richard Constantino has his first big case as lead detective.
She was laying on her back, face up. I noticed a large amount of blood in her hair, on her face, on her upper extremities. She was dressed in a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt. The apartment itself was an organized mess. There was clothes on the furniture, magazines, newspapers on the tables. TV was on and very loud.
Extraordinary powers.
The victim is soon identified as Betty Jean Solomon. A black glove lies near her head, a gym bag beside her. The living room phone is off the hook. The scene is bloody. It's obvious Solomon has been shot several times. On the scene with Constantino is Detective Kevin Morgan.
There was no reports of any screaming or of any weapons being fired. You would think with that amount of gunshots, you would have had someone hear something.
Silencer, maybe? Who found her?
Her husband.
Detectives learn that her husband, Paul Solomon, is 41 years old. He teaches 6th grade. He and Betty Jean have been married for 19 years. Their teenage daughter, Kristen, is currently off on a ski trip.
Says he was out at the bowling alley all night. Oh yeah. Get this. The uniform? Let him wash the blood off his hands.
What?
Yeah.
Where is he?
Solomon tells detectives that his wife was a financial manager. She relaxed by reading romance novels in front of the television. There's no obvious reason anyone would want her dead.
So tell me what happened. Where were you this evening?
Solomon was with Betty Jean most of the day. At 6:30, he went bowling and didn't get back until 11:30.
In the small township of Springfield.
When he saw his wife on the floor, he assumed she had fallen asleep in front of the TV. But when he turned her over, he realized she'd never wake up again.
Oh, God.
There's nothing that makes me doubt his story at this point. I treated him as a grieving spouse.
As a matter of routine, Solomon's clothes are collected as evidence. They're stained with his wife's blood. Police turn their attention to the crime scene. They scour the comfortable home, looking for evidence. The medical examiner studies Betty Jean's body. Her hands are bagged to preserve any traces of skin or hair that might identify her killer.
We found some fibers in the hand. We secured that for the analysis.
The black glove found near the body is swabbed for traces of blood.
You find anything on that?
Nothing.
There was no signs of a forced entry. It appears that it was someone she knew or someone she felt comfortable with that she allowed into the building.
There's not much to go on. Police need more information from Paul Solomon.
So it was thought the best thing to do is talk to Paul Solomon and nail him to his story. Paul Solomon is the main suspect at this time, simply by the fact that he was the last person to see the victim alive, and he was the one to find the victim dead.
At the station, Solomon fails to impress detectives.
I was uncomfortable with the way Paul Solomon was acting. He didn't appear to be the type of person who just found his wife shot numerous times to be in a state of shock or to be emotionally distraught.
Well, it doesn't look so good that you washed your hands at the scene of the crime now, does it?
I told you, her blood was on them.
After hours of interrogation, Solomon sticks to his story, but police aren't convinced.
The feeling was that there was something eating at him and he knew something that he didn't want to tell us or couldn't tell us.
You see, I'm just worried about that bowling alley. I hope that manager can confirm that you were there for 5 hours. 5 hours, Paul, that's a long time.
Challenged by police, Solomon changes his statement. He admits that he left the bowling alley shortly after he arrived and went to a bar called Treetops. There, he met a woman he'd been having an affair with. Both of them teach at the same school. They'd been lovers for 2 years. The meeting had been arranged by phone that afternoon.
She good in the sack? I hope so.
What's your lover's name, Paul?
Carolyn Warmus.
The fact that he's having an affair tells police that Paul Solomon has a motive for murder.
Is there anything else you want to confess, Paul?
No.
I said, you go home, you kill your wife, and then you go and you get a blowjob from your girlfriend. It doesn't go over too good.
It wasn't a perfect marriage, but I'm not a murderer.
Detective John Bonaiuto chases down the latest lead.
Police, open up.
Perhaps Carolyn Warmus can shed some light on what happened.
So we went up to the apartment, banged on the door, and she answered the door in a nightgown.
Miss Warmus, we need your cooperation in an incident involving Paul Solomon.
Did you say Paul Solomon?
Yeah, I believe you're familiar with him.
What has he done?
Investigators bring the 25-year-old teacher in for questioning.
I think he was with me to feel alive. He wanted to leave his wife. He couldn't because of Kristen.
How long were you in a relationship?
Warmus tells police that she and Solomon share a passionate relationship and that the two are growing closer.
And you were with him on the night in question?
I asked her where she was, and she said she was at Treetops with Paul that night. I guess they had these rendezvous quite often.
She confirms that she arrived at the restaurant at 7:45 that evening. Paul was already there. She tells police that the two were together until 11 o'clock. Warmus isn't the only one being questioned. Detectives are still grilling Solomon. But apart from admitting to his affair, Solomon isn't giving them anything else.
Detective Morgan and myself are playing off each other with Paul Solomon in hopes of eliciting some type of admission or confession.
That's it?
At that point, Gary Pillersdorf said that he represents Paul Solomon, that he wished all questioning to stop.
My client's done talking. Let's go, Paul.
Not only was Pillersdorf Solomon's attorney, he was his best friend as well.
Detectives,
What the hell was that?
His affair with Carolyn Warmus has established a possible motive for the murder of his wife. He's become their prime suspect.
Obviously, he's with his mistress, or a person he's having an affair with, so he makes himself more of a suspect to us.
The next morning, police return to the crime scene, digging for more evidence, anything that might confirm Paul Solomon as the killer. Forensics expert Dr. Peter DeForest looks for shell casings and bullet fragments that might tell police what kind of gun was used.
I got a call from the Greenberg PD after they had already begun the scene investigation and already removed the body from the scene.
9 shots were fired, but police haven't been able to find the casings from 9 bullets.
I picked up a glove on the floor that was near where the body had been, and I gave it a little flip up onto a coffee table.
He continues his search, eventually finding the missing evidence.
The shell casings were recovered. All the bullet fragments that we found at the scene were marked as evidence, and then Dr. DeForest started trying to figure out the trajectory of the shots and which direction the bullets came from.
The ballistics report confirms the type of gun that killed Betty Jean. Micro-thin markings on the bullets reveal one other vital clue.
I saw the multiple irregular linear scratch marks on the side of the bullet. That is usually indication of a silencer. So I was able to tell the detectives that it was a .25 caliber bullet with a silencer.
We were advised by Dr. Rowe that Betty Jean Solomon was in fact shot 9 times, and she also sustained blood force trauma to her right ear.
Police now have a murder weapon. And the autopsy soon confirms that Betty Jean was killed before 11:30. Paul Solomon could have shot his wife after going to the bowling alley and before meeting Carolyn for dinner. If he is the killer, it would explain why there are no signs of forced entry. Police believe Solomon could have surprised his wife, shot her, then staged the murder scene.
He's just watching my shows.
He turned up the TV to cover the additional shots, then unplugged the phone to make it look like a home invasion. Then he rushed to his rendezvous at the bar.
What's gone into you tonight?
Just really missed you.
When he returned home hours later, he called the police and played the role of a grieving spouse.
I just got home. I think my wife is dead. She's lying on the floor bleeding.
But there is no hard evidence to back up police suspicions. They can't find the murder weapon. And Solomon's clothes test negative for traces of gunpowder. Nothing links a firearm of any kind to him. Determined to prove their case, Constantino and his team canvass the neighborhood, retracing Betty Jean's last days and nights, and gathering information about the family.
I knew we were going to have to recreate Betty Jean Solomon's final moments. Talk to the people she talked to so we can try to find out what happened.
Constantino is frustrated until the investigation turns up a shocking 911 call made from Solomon's home on the night of the murder.
What the hell?
About 7:15 that evening, January 15th, an operator from New York Telephone Company received a 911 call from a female who simply stated that he or she is trying to kill me, and the line went dead. The operator wasn't sure the caller said he or she because the call was so quick.
The 911 call clearly places the time of death, 7:15 p.m. It confirms that Solomon could have killed his wife and still made it to the restaurant by 7:30 p.m. Constantino assumes Betty Jean said he on the phone and was referring to Solomon. The detective puts his prime suspect under surveillance, hoping for anything to confirm his story, but he comes up dry. As the investigation continues, Constantino learns that Paul Solomon wasn't the only one having an affair. Betty Jean was unfaithful too.
We spoke to people who knew her and some of her co-workers. Come to find out that there might have been an affair with her boss in one of the banks, and he did confirm it, that they were seeing each other for about 10 years, 9-10 years.
It's possible this long-term romance went sour and turned deadly.
But his alibi that he gave us for the night of the murder was solid and unimpeachable. He didn't last too long as a suspect.
Another possibility is Paul Solomon's attorney.
We received information that Gary Pillersdorf might have been having an affair with the victim, Betty Jean Solomon. This sidetracked the investigation as well, because now we had to eliminate Gary Pillersdorf as a possible suspect for murdering Betty Jean Solomon. He was eliminated rather rapidly.
All eyes are still on Paul Solomon. But it's not the prime suspect who raises the suspicions of police. Carolyn Warmus appears at Betty Jean Solomon's funeral. It strikes Constantino as more than a little strange.
To me, it was odd that here she was carrying on an affair with Paul Solomon, and she's showing up at his wife's funeral. Left a bad taste in my mouth, morally, you know.
Warmus now becomes a possible suspect. Perhaps she was the one who wanted Betty Jean out of the way. Constantino discovers that she had a privileged but troubled upbringing, including an alcoholic mother and a distant father. To find out more, he asks to interview Warmus, but she cancels at the last minute. She tells police that she'll only speak through her newly hired lawyer.
Oh, really? And I believe at this point that she might be hiding something.
Detectives dig into the phone records of their two prime suspects.
Paul Solomon's phone records really didn't tell me too much. Normal phone conversations to people that we already knew, friends, family. On the other hand, Carolyn Warmus's was quite different, her phone records. There was thousands and thousands of phone calls that she made. She lived on the phone.
The records confirm a call from Carolyn to Paul on the day of the murder. A 55-minute conversation. According to Solomon, that call had been casual. The two talked about missing Carolyn's birthday the previous weekend and their dinner plans that evening. As police probe more deeply, they uncover stories of Carolyn inviting herself to the family's apartment. They also learn that she gave Solomon's daughter, Kristen, expensive gifts and took her on ski trips.
On more than one occasion, she would come for dinner, insinuate herself into the family. Betty Jean was not very happy with Carolyn Warmus being so close to her family.
Oh, do you know any jokes? Say something funny.
I know a few.
Yeah?
You got some damp on your... It's right here.
Then Constantino finds that Warmus called a very unusual character, a private investigator named Vinnie Parco.
She wanted to talk to me about this guy that she used to see. How many phone calls?
Parco tells police that he was hired by Warmus 2 years ago.
But she doesn't stop talking, that girl.
At the time, she was having another affair with a married bartender.
Warmus told Parco she wanted this married bartender to be investigated. In actuality, what she wanted to do was break up his marriage and be with him. So she enlisted Parco to have pictures taken of her in various stages of dress and undress. So she can send these to the bartender's wife in hopes to break up the marriage.
Constantino uncovers more disturbing stories. While she was a college student in 1983, Warmus was given a restraining order. She had been harassing an ex-boyfriend who got engaged to another woman. But it didn't stop Warmus from trying to intimidate the bride-to-be. Then another strange twist. Police get the results of an independent polygraph test taken by Carolyn Warmus.
Yes. Yes. No. No.
We received a phone call from the attorney saying that she took this polygraph test, that she passed it, and she had no involvement in the death of Betty Jean Solomon.
I did not kill Betty Jean Solomon.
We said we would like to have our own polygraph examiner talk to her and ask the questions that we wanted to ask. They refused and said they would send sheets from her examination to us.
The stunt only fuels the growing belief police have that she may be the killer. But then the already complicated case becomes even murkier.
Approximately 5 months after his wife's death, Paul Solomon begins dating a woman, Barbara Baller.
Police are suspicious that Solomon would get romantically involved so soon after the death of his wife. But what police really take notice of is the response Carolyn Warmus has to the new girlfriend.
Paul Solomon and Barbara Baller take a vacation and go to Puerto Rico together. Warmus finds out, so she flew to Puerto Rico. And all the way down, she was on the phone in the plane, calling Paul Solomon's hotel, trying to speak with Paul Solomon.
Paul Solomon's room, please. If you could give me his room number, it's of vital importance. It's essential that I need to talk to Mr. Solomon right now. Sharon, Carolyn, Madeline.
She starts leaving messages, making him try to think that he was supposed to go with her and not Barbara Baller.
Warmus calls Solomon's hotel repeatedly and sends him long-winded, flirtatious letters.
I'm here exactly as we planned. Kareeb Hilton, room 1574. And if I'm not in, leave me a message as to where and when you want to meet this afternoon. Love, C.
When Solomon doesn't respond, Carolyn's behavior grows increasingly bizarre.
Yes, this is Carolyn Warmus calling again. He will be furious when he finds out. Then you will be fired!
Solomon starts to fear for his safety.
He observed Carolyn Warmus in the lobby, apparently stalking him, and he was very disturbed and scared about it. He was escorted to the airport, and he hightailed it back to New York for fear that something could happen to him there.
Well, I don't believe he's checked out!
Solomon leaves, but Warmus stays behind, and her obsessive behavior takes an alarming turn.
During this whole process where Warmus is in Puerto Rico, she makes a phone call to Marie Baller, who's Barbara Baller's mother. She identified herself as a detective from the police department in New York who was investigating the homicide.
We're very concerned about your daughter. Did you know the man she's dating shot his wife 9 times with a .25 caliber gun with a silencer?
Barbara's mother reports the disturbing call, and police trace it to Carolyn. Their prime suspect has just made a serious mistake. Only the police and the killer know how many times Betty Jean Solomon was shot and what weapon was used. The information was never released to the public.
At this point, I'm 99.9% convinced Carolyn Warmus was a shooter and she did it alone.
But still, all police have are suspicions. What they need is proof. Devastated by events in Puerto Rico, Carolyn Warmus returns to New York. She spends a week under psychiatric observation. Meanwhile, Constantino digs into old evidence with new eyes.
Shell casings here.
Betty Jean Solomon's 911 emergency call has always bothered him. For one thing, there was no blood on or near the phone. For another, residents in Westchester weren't used to calling 911.
In 1989, there was no 911 in Westchester County. Emergency services gave every homeowner a sticker they placed on their phone. In case of emergency, call this number, and it's a 7-digit number.
Calling 911 would work, but at the time, only residents of New York City were officially set up with the service.
I'm thinking, Carolyn Warmus, who lives in the city of New York, might have placed that phone call.
Constantino is convinced that Warmus made the call, knowing that Paul was already at the restaurant waiting for her. She thought the 7:15 p.m. call would give him an alibi. But Constantino still needs concrete evidence placing Warmus at the scene, and he needs to connect her to the murder weapon. Then, in October of 1990, detectives uncover another number in her phone records. It links Warmus to a man named Sheldon Carroll, a former colleague of Vinnie Parco.
Sheldon Carroll, who was a private investigator as well, worked for Vinnie Parco. Sheldon Carroll owned the .25 caliber Beretta Jetfire and was given to Vinnie Parco as a gift.
Talk, Vinny, because if you don't, it's gonna be you going to jail. Now, we know about the gun.
Could this be the gun that killed Betty Jean Solomon? Police bring Parco in to get to the bottom of the story.
And take it. So I'm giving you an opportunity today to talk and tell us what we need.
Parco finally admits that he sold the Beretta to Carolyn Warmus a week before the murder.
This is called the magazine, okay? Slide it in. And you never, never point it at anybody you don't want dead.
He also confesses that he sold her a silencer.
It just screws in?
Just screws in. Hey, what'd I say?
Vinnie Parco then said he enlisted the services of a person named George Peters to fabricate a silencer for that weapon.
Police search the metal shop owned by Peters. They find a piece of wood with bullets embedded in it. Peters fired at the wood to test the silencer. The bullets are too mangled to undergo lab analysis. But Constantino strikes gold when he recovers a shell casing.
Took that shell casing to ballistics, which positively identified it as the same shell casing that was found at the scene of Betty Jean Solomon was murdered. Now we can put the gun into Parco's hand. Take that gun, put it into Peter's hand, get the silencer fabricated, back into Parco's hand. We gave it to Carolyn Warmus, and that ballistic evidence shows up in Betty Jean Solomon's apartment on January 15, 1989.
Investigators now search Warmus's apartment, looking for the gun. They don't find it, but they do discover a cancelled check made out to Vincent Parco. They also discover goodbye letters to Paul, offering to take the blame for his wife's murder. But the police want a better case. Constantino returns to square one. Was there a vital clue still to be discovered?
I went back to the crime scene photographs just to see if there's something I might have missed, something might have been overlooked, something somebody else might have overlooked.
He's struck by a piece of evidence he hasn't seen in a very long time.
I looked closely on the floor next to the couch, not far from the body, and I see this, what appears to be a glove. We didn't know whether it was Betty Jean's glove. We didn't know if it was Paul's glove, Kristen's glove. We don't know whose glove it was, because there was a single glove on the floor next to the couch.
The glove was moved by a ballistics expert at the scene. After that, no one's sure where it went.
I don't remember recovering that glove when we were doing the crime scene. So I said to myself, well, where is this glove? I contacted the lab. to see if it might still be up there for processing.
When the lab can't find the glove, Constantino talks to everyone who might have come in contact with it, including other investigators, patrol cops, even Paul Solomon.
This glove played a big part in the case.
You guys got that black glove down there? Yeah, the glove, the black one.
The longer it stays missing, the more convinced police are that it holds an important clue.
At that point, I started to become concerned that, maybe this case is not going to clear. I'm second-guessing myself, I'm second-guessing the investigation.
Frustrated by the missing glove, Constantino moves on. He returns to the evidence that's borne the most fruit, Carolyn Warmus's phone records. Her local records had shown that on the day of the murder, she and Paul Solomon spoke for 55 minutes. They had made plans to meet that evening.
Please. For me?
During that call, she learned that Betty Jean would be alone that night because her daughter, Kristen, was off on a ski trip. Police have just acquired Carolyn's long-distance records. They show that moments after she talked to Paul, she called a gun store in New Jersey.
We get this phone call that's made to arrange a sports shop. So that was significant in that she spoke to Paul Solomon on the day of the homicide. And according to her phone records, as soon as she hangs up from the phone call to Paul Solomon, she has a phone call to a gun shop.
Now, how do you get there from New York?
Employees at the shop don't remember Carolyn Warmus. But they tell police that a woman did purchase .25 caliber ammunition on that day.
It was a person named Lisa Katai. She was a blonde, approximately 5'6" in height, and pretty much the same physical features as Carolyn Warmus. She said that she worked with Carolyn Warmus 1 or 2 years prior.
Katai tells investigators that she and Warmus became friends based on common ground. Both were dating married men. They had lunch together and socialized. But when police show Katai her transaction record from Ray's sports shop, she denies being there.
That's not my signature.
It's not your signature?
No.
Katai says that her driver's license was stolen around the time of the murder. The driver's license was used as ID to buy the bullets. Her photo on the license is very similar to Carolyn Warmus.
One can imply and infer that Carolyn Warmus stole this driver's license with the intent of using it for this reason.
To Constantino, it's the final piece of the puzzle. Carolyn Warmus is indicted for murder on September 25th, 1990. Police are now certain what happened on that deadly night 9 months ago.
Carolyn goes to the house, knocks on the door. The door's answered by Betty Jane, probably not feeling threatened at all by this person.
Paul's not home.
At this point, there's probably words being said.
I came to see you. I'm concerned about Kristen. Can I come in?
Yeah, sure, yeah. It's a bit messy. I was just watching my shows.
And then Carolyn pulls the gun and she starts shooting.
Returning from a visit to her favorite Aunt Margaret in the small township of Springfield. It was here that something took place which gave her extraordinary powers.
After killing her rival, Carolyn makes the 911 call.
He's trying to kill me!
To place the time of death at 7:15. Then she goes to the bar to claim her prize.
Guess who?
Hey, you.
Hi.
It's a sensational story. The trial of Carolyn Warmus begins on January 14th, 1991.
This case received an inordinate amount of publicity. It was a zoo. It was a media circus.
Lisa Fantino covers the notorious event for radio and TV.
The media attention for the Warmus trial was enormous. The Fatal Attraction movie had come out at that time and had a lot of scenes in Westchester. Men do cheat on their wives, but the Fatal Attraction movie brought it to the forefront of attention. And when this particular man cheated on his wife, it looked like he had cheated on her with the wrong woman.
Assistant District Attorney Douglas Fitzmaurice is part of the well-prepared prosecution team.
It's a sensational homicide, not only because of the circumstances and the brutality, but it's also sensational because of the location of the community where this occurred and the players involved. It was something I had never anticipated, nor had ever seen anything the likes of before in my career.
Every day, Carolyn was dressed to the nines, very smartly dressed, very pretty. She looked like a model, not like a murder defendant.
On first appearance, she's certainly not someone who you would say was Carolyn Warmus, killer. Carolyn Warmus, cold-blooded killer. Carolyn Warmus, obsessive, compulsive behavior.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have caught the killer of Betty Jean Solomon. It's the defendant, Carolyn Warmus.
The prosecution describes Carolyn's history of failed relationships and her emotional response when they end. They claim her obsessions peaked with Paul Solomon.
We did not have any physical evidence connecting her to the crime. We did not have fingerprints. We did not have surveillance video. We did not have a confession. We were focused primarily on establishing that Carolyn Warmus had a motive to kill Betty Jean Solomon, namely her affair with Paul Solomon. Carolyn was obsessed with Paul Solomon. She wanted him, and she couldn't have him as long as he remained married to his wife.
I feared for my life and for Barbara and Kristen. I became convinced that Carolyn had killed Betty Jean.
Detective Richard Constantino spends days on the stand, going over his investigation in detail.
Custom made, just for you.
And Vinnie Parco testifies to selling Warmus the silencer-equipped gun. Then, the prosecution presents its most damning piece of evidence.
This MCE phone record shows Miss Warmus making a call at 3:02 p.m. on the day of the murder to Ray's Sports Shop.
The prosecution also presents their theory that Carolyn stole a driver's license to buy the ammunition. Even without physical evidence, it seems like a strong case. Representing Carolyn Warmus is defense attorney David Lewis. The high-profile lawyer once represented Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega.
My client is innocent, period.
He goes after the credibility of the prosecution witnesses.
The absolute truth, and we were going to get to the absolute bottom of this.
He didn't have the smoking gun, and he didn't have a confession, so he tried to attack the circumstantial evidence. He was a very good attorney, very good attorney.
The defense, with good foundation and good reason, just tore apart the police investigation.
David Lewis cites Vinnie Parco's claim to be a world-class liar.
You teach a learning annex course, don't you? Called, what is it? How to Get Anything from Anyone? Well, isn't it true that you tell your students, I will do anything, lie, cheat, or steal, to get information, right? You just stood by while a patrol cop let Paul Solomon wash blood from his hands, right? He destroyed vital evidence that could have linked him to the murder. Because you, sir, were the lead detective.
That's correct.
Yet you failed to ensure that the black glove was secured as evidence.
You find anything on that?
Nothing. That may have had the real killer's forensic traces on it.
David Lewis tried to make the police department, in general, seem like we were inept and incapable of doing a good job, and that wasn't the case. He tried to discredit the police department, and it didn't work.
But we were aware from day one that the missing glove was going to be a handicap for our prosecution.
Lewis has a very different theory.
That this was a conspiracy to frame Carolyn Warmus.
He tells the jury Warmus was set up by the real killers Vinnie Parco and Paul Solomon.
Vinnie Parco both planned this out. My client...
He puts two underworld figures on the stand.
She's caught wrapped up...
The first claims Parco asked him to murder a woman several months before Betty Jean's death.
These two men...
The second claims he saw two men, calling themselves Vinnie and Paul, exchange money in the bowling alley washroom on the night of the murder.
I dropped the gun in the deepest part of the river. You gonna go see the girl? Yes.
But it's a shaky theory.
Have fun.
We, being the press, did not believe it at all.
But Lewis has an ace up his sleeve that questions whether Warmus is really connected to the gun that killed Betty Jean. It's a piece of evidence that undermines the entire prosecution case.
Carolyn Warmus here is a cold-blooded killer. It's ridiculous, it's preposterous, because I have a piece of evidence.
David Lewis looked the jury in the eye and promised them he was going to put something in their hand, something that they could hold and touch and talk about with each other that would establish that Carolyn Warmus was innocent of the crime for which she was charged.
He presents the jury with what he says is Carolyn Warmus's real long-distance phone bill. It does not have a call to Ray's sports shop on the day of the murder.
The striking difference between our version of the telephone bill and Warmus's version of the bill was that the phone call to the Plainfield, New Jersey gun shop appeared nowhere on the customer invoice, and that, of course, turned out to be the smoking gun that David Lewis had alluded to, and we're stunned. I mean, we're literally stunned. This was the reasonable doubt that would lead to Carolyn Warmus's exoneration.
It makes it seem that the prosecution phone records are fakes, made to frame Warmus.
The moment that that telephone document that was introduced by the defense was put in the jury's hands, we understood that we needed every effort to prove that it was a fraud. So we came to the realization that there were several aspects to this piece of paper that allowed us to argue to the jury that it was a fraud.
The prosecution quickly proves that their records are real and that the defense copies have been altered. But the judge allows both sets of records to stand in court. The jury retires to consider both sides. Is Carolyn Warmus guilty, or has she been set up?
The overall picture of the evidence by closing statements, it favored the prosecution.
To be honest with you, I was very confident.
But when it comes, the verdict is shocking. The jurors can't reach a decision. The judge declares a mistrial. Warmus goes free.
The jury did not see or hear everything that the reporters get to see, hear, and be privy to. And David Lewis was very effective at putting enough doubt out there.
I was devastated. We had committed every day over the course of many, many months to prosecuting this case and giving our best effort, and it had not turned out as we had hoped. Almost every step along the way, we would move 3 steps forward, and then we would get pushed back 2.5 steps.
After a hung jury, a murder case can be tried again. And on the eve of the second trial, the fortunes of the prosecution change.
Hey, detective. Just a sec.
Paul Solomon notifies the police that he found the missing glove. He said it wasn't his, it wasn't Kristen's.
According to Solomon, the glove had been in his closet.
So obviously, now I believe we found the glove.
We're thrilled when Paul announces that he's found the glove. We're thrilled when we see that the glove certainly resembles the glove that's been missing for so many years.
The black glove is rushed to the lab to see if it holds any clues that might solve the case.
When the glove was brought to me, I put it under a stereo microscope with good illumination and saw areas of concentrated blood on the black cashmere.
When I examined the glove, I didn't see the blood stains initially. So I took him to the stereo microscope. By scanning the glove, I could find small areas where there were very small flecks of blood present.
It had some pattern to it. The pattern could be suggestive of objects that are parallel to each other contacting the glove. The idea of it being fingers is a possibility.
The blood tests prove inconclusive. The glove fibers are compared to those found on Betty Jean Solomon's fingers. They match. The big question now is, who owned the black glove?
We learned the manufacturer of the glove. It was a company called Shalimar. Where were these gloves being distributed? What companies was Shalimar distributing these wool gloves to?
Sales receipts and financial records are studied, and the prosecution hits the jackpot.
We were literally able to establish that Carolyn Warmus purchased a Shalimar glove of the exact same model and style that was found by Paul Solomon and left at the murder scene.
When Kristen Solomon says that Carolyn wore similar gloves when the two of them went skiing, Fitzmaurice believes his case is finally rock solid. The second trial of Carolyn Warmus begins in January of 1992. The glove is just one piece of the puzzle. A twisted case of obsessive love gone wrong. Added to the existing evidence, the glove is the final nail in her coffin. Carolyn Warmus is found guilty of killing Betty Jean Solomon and is sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
At the end of the day, I think that the right person is in jail for killing Betty Jean Solomon. As for Paul Solomon, I wonder where he is and how he's living with himself and how Kristen's actually turned out.
Looking back on it, I'd have to say that it was an experience of once in a lifetime.
When there was no leads to follow up, Richard found ways to follow up new leads and develop new theories.
The main thing I learned from this case was on January 15th, 1989, I should have called in sick. But we put the right person in jail.
Carolyn Warmus has always maintained her innocence, but has never been granted a retrial. She will not be eligible for parole until 2017, by which time she will be 53 years old.